The autumn leaves drifted past the tall windows of Lincoln High School, painting shadows across the worn linoleum floors. It was 1978, and the hallways smelled of floor wax and chalk dust, familiar scents that had marked generations of students passing through these corridors. Martha Chen had walked these halls for 3 years without making a sound. At 17, she had perfected the art of invisibility. Her dark hair fell like a curtain around her face, and she kept her eyes down, always down. The other students barely noticed her, which was exactly how she preferred it. But Danny Sullivan noticed. Danny was 18, tall and broad-shouldered, the kind of boy who filled doorways and demanded attention. He wore his Letterman jacket like armor and surrounded himself with friends who laughed too loud at jokes that weren't funny. For weeks, he had been testing Martha, pushing boundaries the way bullies do when they sense someone won't fight back. It started small, a shoulder bump in the hallway. Books knocked from her arms. Whispered comments that made his friends snicker. Martha endured it all with the same quiet dignity she brought to everything else in her life. What Danny didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Martha Chen carried within her the teachings of her grandfather. Every Sunday since she was 6 years old, he had taught her the ancient art of Tai Chi in the park near their home. Not for fighting, he always said, but for balance. For understanding how strength could be gentle, and gentleness could be strong. The day everything changed started like any other. Martha stood at her locker between second and third period, carefully organizing her books. The hallway buzzed with the familiar sounds of teenage life, lockers slamming, conversations overlapping, the squeak of sneakers on polished floors. She didn't see Danny approaching until his shadow fell across her locker door. "Hey, China doll," he said, his voice dripping with mock sweetness. His friends flanked him on either side, grinning in anticipation. Martha's fingers tightened on her math textbook, but she said nothing. She had learned that silence was sometimes the best defense. "I'm talking to you," Danny said, louder now. Other students were starting to notice, forming that terrible circle that appears whenever conflict brews in a high school hallway. Still, Martha remained silent. She closed her locker gently and turned to walk away. That's when Danny's hand shot out and slapped her, hard, across the face. The sound echoed through the hallway like a gunshot. For a moment, everything stopped. The conversations, the laughter, even the ticking of the old clock on the wall seemed to pause. Martha's cheek burned. She could taste blood where her teeth had cut the inside of her mouth. Tears sprang to her eyes, not from pain, but from 3 years of accumulated hurt, of being invisible, of being less than. Danny raised his hand again, emboldened by her stillness, by the audience, by the power he thought he held. But this time, something in Martha shifted. She heard her grandfather's voice in her mind, calm and clear: "Do not meet force with force. Redirect it. Use their own strength against them." As Danny's hand came down for the second slap, Martha moved. It wasn't a big movement, nothing dramatic or showy. She simply stepped slightly to the side, her hand coming up to guide Danny's wrist in a gentle circular motion. His own momentum, his own aggressive force, carried him forward and down. He tried to catch himself, overcompensating, and that's when Martha applied just a small amount of pressure to a specific point on his elbow, the joint that her grandfather had taught her about. A pressure point where control could be gained without causing permanent harm. Danny's elbow hyperextended with a sickening pop. He went down hard, crying out in pain and surprise. The whole thing had taken less than 3 seconds. The hallway erupted in shocked gasps and murmurs. Danny's friends stood frozen, unsure whether to help him or back away. Danny himself sat on the floor, cradling his arm, his face pale with shock and pain. That's when Mr. Henderson, the history teacher, came running from his classroom. He took in the scene quickly. Danny on the floor, Martha standing over him with tears streaming down her face, the circle of students beginning to scatter. "What happened here, Mr. Henderson demanded. It was Jennifer Morrison, a quiet girl from Martha's English class, who spoke up. Danny hit Martha first, Mr. Henderson. He slapped her. She was just defending herself. Other voices joined in, a chorus of witnesses. For once, the truth couldn't be hidden or twisted. Mr. Henderson helped Danny to his feet and sent him to the nurse's office with his friends. Then he turned to Martha, his eyes kind behind his thick glasses. "Are you all right, Martha?" he asked gently. Martha touched her swollen cheek and nodded. For the first time in 3 years, she looked up, really looked up, and met an adult's eyes directly. "I'm okay," she said. Her voice was soft but steady. "I'm going to be okay." The school called both sets of parents. Danny's elbow was badly sprained but not broken. He received a week's suspension. His parents, shocked by their son's behavior, grounded him for a month. Martha's parents arrived expecting to find their daughter in trouble. Instead, they found a daughter who had finally found her voice. That evening, over dinner, Martha told them everything. About the bullying, about standing up for herself, about finally understanding what her grandfather had been teaching her all these years. The next Monday, when Martha walked into school, something had changed. Students nodded at her in the hallways. A few even smiled. Jennifer Morrison invited her to sit at lunch. The invisible girl had become visible, but on her own terms. Years later, Martha would become a social worker, dedicating her life to helping others find their voice. She would think often of that autumn day, of the moment she discovered that strength and gentleness could live in the same breath, that standing up for yourself didn't mean becoming what hurt you. And sometimes, in the quiet moments, she would remember her grandfather's words, "True strength isn't about defeating others. It's about knowing when to be still, and when to move. It's about protecting yourself without losing who you are." That was the real lesson. Not the technique, not the physical skill, but the wisdom to know that defending yourself and remaining kind weren't opposites. They were two sides of the same truth. If this story touched your heart, please like and subscribe to hear more stories of courage, kindness, and finding strength in unexpected places. Share it with someone who needs to remember that it's never too late to find your voice. And leave a comment below telling us about a time when you discovered your own quiet strength. Your story matters, and we'd love to hear it.